Hello, this is your host, Paul Harvey at Life, Passion and Business. I realise I put this at the end of the programme most of the time, and I also realise I don't often listen to the end of podcasts. So I thought I'd tell you here before we get started. So the first thing is this podcast is not supported in any way. We have no sponsorship. So if you would like to support us, do check out the Buy Me a Coffee link on this podcast app, and you'll also find it at the website. Okay, before I take you to the podcast, I want to give you a little bit of a reminder about the power of focus and accountability. This is the one tool that will really get you towards the goals you are seeking, towards the path you want to take. So listen to the end to find out more, or check out the link in the show notes. Anyway, let's get you back to the podcast. My name is Paul Harvey, and you are listening to Life, Passion and Business, a podcast born out of my desire to find greater meaning in life at the time when I thought there was none. Since that day, I have spoken to hundreds of people, and what I have discovered is that our story is everything. Because what we do, feel or experience is based on the stories that we tell ourselves. It's time to explore what it means to live a good life. How do we make this experience better? And more importantly, how do we lead the world to a better place? Hello, welcome to the podcast, and this is a unique tribute program to a former guest that has passed away. Will Pye was with us back in 2020 at our spirituality event. Will, known as the Gratitude Man, passed away peacefully on the 20th of July this year. Only discovered recently, hence this is such a late tribute to the man. But he was an amazing teacher of this idea of radical gratitude. And that came out of his own experience in life, because as a young man, his desire was to end suffering, and he had a deep yearning to know truth. And he did years of intensive spiritual exploration. He did Zen practice, energy healing, shamanic exploration, yoga, qigong, philosophical studies and scientific research. And it was all about curing his own depression. And then, having done all of that study at 31, he was diagnosed with a brain tumour, and he initiated a process of healing and transformation and awakening. It worked, and he recovered fully. Prior to him, he had a successful business as a transformational coach, and he left that behind to become an author and what he called at the time a spiritual entertainer. That tumour returned a couple of years ago, and he went through, again, a series of practices to heal himself. And in the end, he did need to have surgery. And he had a beautiful time of it, a very gentle time of it from what I can see, and always shared gratitude. So this was my conversation with Will back in 2020, towards the end of 2020, that year, the year when we were locked down and did all sorts of bits and pieces. So it was a year of bonkers politics, bonkers virus, and all sorts of bonkers things going on, which I actually say in the podcast. That's why it's memorable to me. So the conversation touches on all sorts of things. It touches on the concept of who we are in terms of how we sit in the physical world. It looks at gratitude, and it looks at reality. So it's quite a diverse conversation. At the same time, there's a lot of humour in it and a lot of interest. So let's join the conversation from spirituality with Will Pye. How did it all begin? Where do you start?
That's a good question. And when you're talking about bios, or when you're talking about any story, the question is, where do you begin? This is the story of the universe, right? Do we begin at the Big Bang or elsewhere? And does my story begin at birth or before that? Or was it some great moment in my life where things shifted? For me, the conscious fact of my being on a spiritual journey became clear when I was began to become clear when I was 18 or 19, and had this really powerful synchronicity around an owl appearing. And that was the beginning of many very significant synchronistic occurrences that were highly improbable and highly unlikely, and they got sort of silly with their frequency and detail and humor and transformational oomph.
Sometimes the universe keeps sending signals, and you just have to eventually you notice them all.
Exactly right. And that very fact that the world of matter and form can give us communications the very fact of synchronistic phenomena occurring is itself very revealing into the nature of reality and our experience here upon planet Earth.
Mm. So what kind of things were happening to you? What were you seeing?
So the owl has been the key ongoing motif in my synchronistic phenomena. After I wrote my first book, I could go on and on with the examples, but I'll give you one quick example. In my first book, Blessed with a Brain Tumor, I write a chapter called The Gift of Guidance, and I share some of the synchronicities that showed up for me. As I just finished that chapter and I was leaving my village of upbringing with my father, I told him I was just written this book on this chapter on synchronicities and so on. I felt really good about it. And he knows that's meaning of the owl. And as I said that to him, an owl flew in front of the car. This is in the middle of the day. So that was kind of like, oh, well, that's cool. Then a week or two later, I was driving back into the village of my upbringing with my mother. I'm sure there's some sort of deeper Jungian thing there with the father and mother as well. And the conversation, I was explaining, I just finished this book called IQ84 by Haruki Murakami, and it talks about the owl. And in this sense, the owl is a harbinger of the subconscious. It's it flies out of the dark woods to bring into our awareness. And I was relating this to the situation with my father that I just mentioned, and these synchronicities in general. And at that moment, an owl flew out of the woods to our left in front of the car. So that sort of, and I at that point I thought, oh shit, this is probably, excuse my language, this is perhaps going to be indicative of what sort of subconscious material might be arising, what sort of shadow work might be required over the next 6 months, which as it turned out was pretty accurate in what I was then engaging with.
Yeah, are owls normal in that part of the world?
They are, though not so common during the day. So both of those situations took place during the day. Yeah.
Well, so what was the journey? I mean, obviously, I noticed in the introduction, we talked about yoga and all these things. I mean, obviously you had something that made you take up all of that spiritual training. And I think as we said, when we met, for someone, you did years of spiritual training, then to get a brain tumor. I mean, it's almost like you prepared for it.
It very much felt like that. And looking back after the diagnosis, a lot of what had happened in the previous 10 years made more sense and seemed to be, I mean, one could say, well, how fortunate that I had been attending energy healing studies and been familiarizing myself with various forms of energy healing and energy medicine. How fortunate that I had been training myself in state training, and how fortunate I've been learning to work with chi or with prana in yoga and qigong, and how fortunate that I've been studying mind-body medicine and spontaneous remissions and so on. I don't see it as fortune. I see it as my soul's intelligence, if you like, that was taking up a training that was to prove useful for that moment of diagnosis, and that moment being inevitably one of great excitement and opportunity, in a sense that this was an opportunity to really walk my talk and an opportunity ultimately to serve consciousness, to serve healing and transformation.
I mean, for the benefit of the listeners, could you actually start that journey at the beginning a little bit for us? I mean, so did each of these traditions that you learned lead one to the other? Was there always a guide in them, or was it what was the, because I mean, people don't often do yoga and then go and do something else and then something else. It's quite rare to find someone taking that track of different modalities.
Well, I was suffering a lot in my early 20s. My teens through to my 20s, there was a lot of depression. I had compulsive behaviors, what would be called addictions. I've never called them addictions, because an addiction is something by its meaning that you cannot stop. And I was quite sure I was going to stop smoking pot and stop gambling, which I did without any sort of 12-step process. So on the one hand, there was an intensity of suffering and a recognition that I needed to transform my body and mind. And on the other hand, there was this deep hunger and yearning to know truth, to know God, what God was. Does it exist? What is God, if it exists, and how can I know it, and so on. So these sort of push and pull, the pull towards truth and the push from my suffering, caused me to be highly motivated to explore different modalities and practices. And meditation was the first few years. Then that became Zen meditation following a meeting with a Zen master. I, at the same time, became a vegetarian for 8 years, though I'm not currently a vegetarian. I got into yoga and qigong around that same time. So for me, those practices still are part of my life. I'm still doing yoga or qigong most days, even if it's just a 5 or 10 minute little maintenance, not at the level of intensity as I used to. And similarly, meditation is a daily practice, although it's more of a moment-to-moment experience rather than something that I do and then don't do. So I think that's why I was so motivated, and I've been fortunate to have some success business-wise in my 20s, such that I had cash to be able to fly around the world and meet with teachers and quantum physicists and attend all these conferences and trainings and to have the time also from that business to devote to hours of spiritual practice. I don't have children, which I understand is a spiritual practice in itself, but also one that tends to make it difficult to sort of give hours of your day to yoga or meditation.
Indeed. It's interesting you pick up on the quantum physics. Is that very related to your spiritual practice? Is there a big synergies here?
I think that quantum mechanics and systems theory and modern neuroscience and quantum biology and basically anything that's a post-materialist scientific exploration have much by the way of supporting my experience and my worldview and how reality operates. And I think I've written in my second book, in the Gratitude Prescription, a little bit of just a summary about quantum mechanics and what I feel are the key teachings and learnings from it, according to Nobel laureates that might know what they're talking about. Although that's a view that's often dismissed or ridiculed amongst many mainstream quantum physicists of today, largely because there's this great sort of elephant in the room of consciousness being causative in the formation of reality, of matter. That is something that the materialist mind, the one schooled in believing in this world being ultimately and only material, it is challenged to embrace. So, yeah, that's a nice sort of your theme and show, and part of what we've been talking about is spirit and the duality of living as a spiritual being in human condition. And I think that the great grappling there in science is the nature of consciousness and what quantum mechanics says and how that can be unified with a classical physical view or a classic physics view.
Yeah, I always remember I went to a meeting years ago, and I think Nassim Harriman was talking at the time, and he's an astrophysicist, or certainly now he works in consciousness. But at the time when he was more on the physical physics side, he was in a meeting somewhere, and they were talking about the expansion of the universe, and his comment, well, who's blowing the universe up? Who's actually blowing the balloon? And the room fell silent because he's mentioned the G. He mentioned the God word, it's like, and that's when he realized that word was not his. So in your experience of this, obviously you've had much more of an experience that the duality, there is no duality. Is that what you're saying to me?
I'm not sure if that's what I was saying. If you're asking me the question, would I affirm that? I'm not saying it's a question. I'm trying to lead us in that. I'm not leading anywhere. I don't know where we're going to go with this. The conversation, it'll go wherever it goes. But it's like there has been so much that you have followed, all leading on a path. It sounds like there's no duality for you. Well, separation is not something I perceive or experience.
Right.
So God for me is right here, right now, as you and as I, and as all phenomena, and the most vibrant, perceivable, knowable, recognizable element of that, I would suggest, is consciousness, which is present in all things and all phenomena, and of course is looking out of your eyes and is looking out of my eyes. or we might characterize it as that. Whether it's actually located in the head or the eyes is a whole other question, but there's certainly a visual aspect and element to consciousness. So I don't experience separation. Clearly, this is a world of great polarity. So on the one hand, we have joy and we have despair, we have light and dark, we have male and female, and water and fire, and so on and so on. I feel that living a spiritual life is the very same thing as living a fully human life, to be kind, to be awake, to be generous, to be supportive of those around you and those that we encounter. Yeah, the golden rule shows up again and again in so many Western traditions for good reason, it feels. So I guess that might be more spiritual for many people, but I think there's got a secular humanistic aspect as well, just to be kind and to be generous and to be loving to the world around us.
I guess the problem with the G word, the God word, is that certainly for people in the West, the God word means old man on a beard and with a beard sitting on a throne somewhere, or has that connotation. It has a human existence or some kind of form that is human. Whereas if we could drop that aspiration of what God is, then it becomes a lot more encompassing, maybe.
Yeah, it's clearly a fairly unhelpful conceptualizing of that which is beyond conception, and making it male and making it, personifying it or anthropomorphizing it it creates something that's easy to disprove or disbelieve. I think that there are other words that might be more helpful, such as consciousness or being, or a field of energy, or the source field, the 0 point field that is present and arising in all things. But for that reason, I don't use the word God a great deal. But certainly I do see a very real integration between science and spirituality. I don't see them as being two opposing worldviews, or rather they are complementary. I think that spiritual inquiry and practice, whether that be, whatever that be for each of us, because for some people it will be meditation, for others it really won't be that form of spiritual practice. It might be it's more dancing or singing or an embodiment practice such as yoga or qigong. For some, it might be all of that and plant spirit medicines. There are these wonderful spiritual technologies that Mother Nature is giving us to further develop and evolve our physiological systems, including, of course, our neurology and how it is able to perceive it and experience consciousness.
Yes, there's one of our guests did ayahuasca and explored that modality, which was quite fascinating. So, I mean, we started this conversation around your journey in terms of your journey through those, not addictions. I can't remember the word you used, but we started that journey. Then obviously,
unhelpful behaviors.
Unhelpful behaviors. That was how you phrased it. And then you went on, obviously, and at some point. So, I mean, obviously, a lot of my listeners won't know your story. Can you just go through that bit of the story when you obviously were diagnosed? I mean, what was the journey then?
Sure. So I was training on a treadmill in my apartment in Canberra, Australia, and felt so good after completing 20 minutes. I got back on to do another 5 minutes of running, and I experienced an altered state of consciousness that felt worrisome. And I knew I needed to get off the treadmill ASAP, which led to me sort of trying to slow it down, but it wouldn't slow down fast enough. So I sort of jumped, ended up falling off. Next thing I know, I've got a couple of gym goers sitting on the floor with me, looking at me very intently, clearly not quite sure what I'm going to do next. And they explained that I'd had a grand mal seizure. And soon after that, I went to the hospital, and I recall the moment where the female doctor walked in and she said that we found a lump in your brain. And from that moment, there was just this intense fascination and peace, and that stayed with me. So 2 years of intensive psycho-spiritual work and healing work followed, at which point, when I felt that had been largely complete, I opted to have surgery. I felt that I had dealt with the energetic source of that tumor. And now it was a case of dealing with the physical residue. Of course, the cranium doesn't expand generally, so probably not a bad idea. And I'd never made it a bad idea, or I was very careful not to make any potential treatment options or courses bad in my mind, or as failing to heal or whatever, that would be really unhelpful in creating a placebo effect of an entirely undesirable nature. So I had that surgery, and after the surgery, of course, now we were able to have the pathological results of the tumor, which had been thought to be a low-grade glioma, a benign malignancy in the medical report, which is a wonderful bit of doublespeak that you find in medicine rather more commonly than we might think. And the pathology results indicated that it was a stage 3 cancerous tumor rather than being a low-grade glioma. And I spoke to my father very soon after that call, and I'd initially just felt disappointment because I knew that it wasn't fully resolved right now. I was going to have to take further action. It was going to impact my schedule. I had a very busy speaking schedule and retreats and all the rest. So there was disappointment present in my heart. And I spoke to my father, and curiously, I think we affect our family members through our growth and development, of course. And he asked me the question, "How are you feeling?" Quite pointedly, really not so masculine. What are you thinking, or what are we going to do? But like, how are you feeling? I said, "Dad, thanks. I appreciate that sort of checking in more deeply. Beneath the disappointment, I feel peace and I feel joy. And there's now an overwhelming gratitude in the awareness of the grace of feeling peace and joy in such a moment." So that was the deepening of the journey, if you like. And I think statistically, what are we now, 2020? I think I'm at the higher range of the statistical likelihood of still being alive. I think most people would have died by now based upon similar diagnosis. So I'm very grateful for every day and grateful for all the traditional health professionals, the doctors and nurses, the neurosurgeon, and grateful to all my non-traditional or sometimes even more traditional, even more ancient and wise teachers and healers who have guided me along the way.
I guess when you have something like that, the journey's never really over, is it? There's always you say, you just have to keep going on the journey.
Well, it's like, for me, it's true as it is for anyone that I might find I've got cancer one day. I don't experience myself mentally or physically with any sense that I have cancer. That's never been a helpful thought or belief. So what doctors use in their languaging and so on is helpful up until a point. But one of the discoveries that was true for me, and I share, is that my perception, my self-diagnosis is more important, more causative, more fundamental than anyone's external diagnosis or meaning making. And that might sound a little outrageous, but it's actually just the basics of what we understand about the nature of health and disease and what the placebo effect tells us and what psychoneuroimmunological studies tell us, which is if I'm feeling good about my bodily experience and if I'm feeling good about my health, then that is supportive of the immunoresponse. That is supportive of that being the reality, that being the case. If I believe this sugar pill is going to create brain chemicals of reducing pain, it will do that. If I don't believe that this actual pain-killing medicine will do that, it won't do that. So our beliefs and our thoughts and our feelings about our physical state are causative. So I choose those thoughts and feelings and beliefs carefully.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that you spent 2 years processing that, the tumor before you actually had an operation. What did you discover in those 2 years?
I discovered a lot. I mean, really, it just deepened and continued a healing journey that I was already on. And it gave me permission to go full fully and wholeheartedly into that. So I told my team leader at my business, you're now my manager. I'm going to be away for a while. I've got a few appointments in the Peruvian jungle and elsewhere. And if my business is here when I get back, that'd be great, but don't stress if it's not, no problem. So I was fortunate and I had the financial resources to just focus on psychospiritual inquiry and engaging healers, including massage therapists, engaging intuitive medicinal intuitives, people that will offer insight from their capacity, an intuitive nutritionist as well, which was tremendously helpful. And plant spirit medicine was a part of it. So yes, I'd worked with ayahuasca before, but I embarked on a more intense retreat down in Peru for a while. I was fortunate to work with other plant spirit medicines as well. I really looked into, of course, all the physical elements as well, my diet, how to minimize radiation to support my physical health. I did about 4 hours a day of medical qigong for a period of time as well, which was extraordinary in the experiences that gave me. For one, opening up my governor channel, or what might be called the Kundalini channel in yogic teachings. And that's really just it's the experience of one's entire energetic center opening up, and the powerful energy that is animating our physiology being perceived and being known and embodied. So I talk about the gifts of the diagnosis and the gift of the brain tumor, and they were many, and they included a lot of what came on the journey of healing. Yeah.
Well, that it's you have been on a journey, as you say, and in all this time, you had the resources and the support for that in a way. So the universe provided that process in some ways. It was it couldn't have happened to a better person, I guess, in some ways. Which is a strange thing to say, isn't it, really? But
well, it might be, but for me, certainly, my experience was that this was a perfect continuation of my journey in this life. There was no sense of it being wrong, and if it leads to my physical death, if it's the vehicle by which I leave this physical body, then that's really no problem.
We have to die of something. We all have to die of something.
We do. I have friends who claim that they're on the path of immortality in their physical body, but I've yet to see any evidence of that being successful. And for me, it's not even a desirable spiritual pursuit. I'm quite comfortable with death, and I'm very excited to be alive and embodied. When death comes, I'm deeply intrigued as to what that experience will be like. I know with certainty it's not the end of life. This idea that death is the end. I mean, it's the end of the physical body. And right here, of course, is a rubbing up of two. Within a materialist view, when the body ends, when the body ceases to be animated, that's the end, right? It's the end of life. But I know that's not the case. I know that I'm an infinite and eternal being, and I will continue to exist in some form or other, not with this body and not with the personality that I carry in this life, but that life is eternal, and I am that is something that I realize and know. And that certainly is profoundly helpful in taking a little bit of the edge and suffering out of life for sure.
I saw an article this week, and it may have been circulating for a while, that they said the jury's out on this, but there's a 50-50 chance we're actually living a virtual reality projection.
Yes, indeed. It's a wonderful metaphor, isn't it? Because it can be seen as, obviously, it's an expression of our technological times, but it is also a metaphor for an infinite and eternal life, where human life is a sort of computer game where we load up a certain life experience to come down here and do the high suffering or this or whatever else that might be, and the coming into this life to experience intense suffering in order to heal the human genetic code, in order to remove certain karmic patterns from the human genetic system. The wounded healer is a fairly powerful and well understood archetype. So quite helpful to people with depression, or quite helpful to people that have been diagnosed with cancer, because in each instance, I have resolved or healed or integrated those energies. So as such, I can't heal anyone else. No one can heal anyone else, but I can embody the presence that has healed me, and I can point people to what's worked and what's been useful in my experience.
It's interesting. I always had that sense whenever I saw the idea of someone laying on hands, or a healer healing someone. It always had the sense to me, well, actually, the healing someone may be them dying. It doesn't necessarily mean them surviving. It means them going on. And it's our perception that, as I said, it's the materialist perception of the world that dying is so bad. Whereas, all right, I'm okay personally. I'm okay with the principle of dying. Very happy with that. It's just the journey getting there I'm not so keen about.
Right. We don't want to experience pain or suffering, and that's perfectly natural. And of course, a brain tumor diagnosis does create the interesting possibility of that journey to death, if it were to go through the brain tumor, of being a particularly interesting one due to the location of the tumor. But this is inescapable in life, pain and suffering, in my experience of life. Yeah, maybe some people are born with extraordinary gifts and capacities, and as such, transcend pain and suffering from their first moments. I've never seen a baby born that does that. That seems to present that. Like we seem to all come into this life with like, oh my god, what am I doing here? Why are they hitting me? What are those lights all about? Yeah, and it's an interesting time to be on planet Earth, that's for sure, with all the technologies, spiritual and otherwise, that we have available to us today.
So it's an interesting time to be on planet Earth. I mean, the spirituality came out of the fact that we have a bonkers virus, and we have bonkers politics, and we have bonkers environmental stuff. It's like, whoa, what is going on at the moment? I mean, where does that sit with your view of the spiritual process at the moment?
May I ask you to ask that question? I'm not sure if you are speaking, because there are many crises, of course, crises with planet Earth.
There's always been many crises, but to me, everyone on planet Earth at this moment in time is experiencing a crisis of some sort. Yeah, and it's either, I mean, in your country, you've got forest fires, you've got heat, you've got bonkers politics. Probably the US, bonkers politics. Here we've got bonkers politics. We've also got, and we've all got a virus. It's like, and the whole world is experiencing this utter change at the moment. Yeah? And it's never happened outside. At this level, outside of a war, was probably the last time we ended up with this level of disruption.
Yeah. So it feels like there is a unifying quality to that experience on the one hand, and a great pausing to our experience, a huge degree of contemplation and consideration of how we're living our lives has been prompted through this. There's also a great opportunity for compassion to express. There's a great opportunity for the truth about health and physical health to be articulated. Obviously, that's not coming through our governments. I haven't heard a single healthcare professional in a government position advise people to take zinc, or to ensure their D3 levels are suitable, or to stop eating crappy carcinogenic laced poisoned food, and so on and so on and so on. But I think that that's certainly an opportunity that comes up in this conversation. And what is going to allow you to be healthy, whether you encounter COVID-19 or not? And there's plenty of scientific evidence for exactly how we can go about creating an environment in our physiology where we're going to be fine, absolutely fine, when we encounter COVID-19 or flu or anything else. Our bodies are designed to process these viruses in such a way that is ultimately creating greater health as we develop a resistance to a new form of threat to physiological functioning. Certainly, fear and anxiety are not helpful in any situation unless there's a bus moving towards you at high speed and you need to get out of the way. Fear then can be very useful. Or if we're looking over a cliff and we feel fear, that's intelligent fear, right? That's the physiological system by which we protect ourselves and stay with these bodies alive. But fear of the virus or fear of being judged for wearing a mask, or fear of being judged for not wearing a mask, or this is not helpful either to our physiological experience or to the collective experience.
And I guess, as you say, it depends on where the person is, depending on how susceptible they are to the virus or to whatever disease or pathogen they're facing. But it's interesting. We go to the gym to strengthen a muscle, and yet we spend our lives using antibacterial sprays and this, that, and the other to defend ourselves against something that could make us stronger.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I saw a comment from a friend just earlier saying that if you're using anything antibacterial, stop using it. There are certain rare situations where using it in a short-term situation makes sense, but our bodies thrive and depend upon plentiful bacteria and a nice spread and mix of bacteria. And we know that children living in highly sterile environments, from a fearful mother or father, just constantly wiping everything down, not letting them get soil on their hands and so on, are doing their children a massive disservice, because it's compromising their natural evolution and growth of their immune system, which is to encounter something a little bit gnarly and something a little bit nasty, and therefore it has the resilience and the strength to overcome it when it happens in the future. So yeah, we should maybe all get amongst the mud and play a little bit more often.
Mud pies for all, I think that's the answer. Yes. Go and build mud pies, because just imagine how much play that would develop and how many good serotonin would happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, we do live in a fascinating world in terms of how it's kind of like is playing out at the moment. So look, Will, we've been talking for a while, and it's been a really interesting journey, and it's gone, and I didn't know where it's going to go, and it's gone all over. So it's been quite fascinating. So if we were going to round the conversation off, where would you take it? What would you like to say?
Wow, I have no idea what I'd like to say, but I guess words flowing out of the mouth. So let's see what continues to be said. So for me personally, two of the greatest practices and activities are gratitude, meditation. That's what I love to share with people, to bring the mind to the abundance of what is in our experience right now, and the inherent abundance of our being, So gratitude can start as a practice for the chocolate and for the sunsets and children's smiles and the good stuff. But we can expand that out to include all phenomena, including challenging phenomena for us, our learning opportunities, and also for our being itself, for beingness, for just the existence of ourselves in this moment, to be grateful for this, and to take time in what we might call meditation, to take time each day to sit, to stop moving, to allow your physical body to come to stillness, even if it's just a minute or two, and enjoy the experience of being embodied. It's
That's a good question, actually. What is a body? In terms of that, is a body a projection? I mean, is it a projection of consciousness? What is a body?
A means by which God experiences itself as an individuated being of free will and creative capacity, we might say.
We might, indeed. You've practiced that one. You've been thinking about that one for a bit.
I've been thinking about that one for a bit. It's not one that I've practiced. I might take a note of that, actually. That sounded quite good, didn't it?
It did. I thought it was very good. I was very impressed. Yeah, it is fascinating when we start looking at like, hey, who am I and what am I? And it's that thing when when you say, okay, I can chop my arm off, but am I in my arm? No, I'm not in my arm. So I can chop the other arm. No, I'm not in that bit either. So where actually am I in my body? And I still haven't worked that one out, but I guess neither of you. Are you going to tell me you have?
Well, we're everywhere in our body, and we're everywhere not in our body as well. So this is the experience. We can bring consciousness, we can notice consciousness, we can do a Vipassana scanning of the whole body, right? And we can find what we are everywhere. We can find our own consciousness everywhere in the body. And also we can take our consciousness to the corner of the room and look down upon ourselves. That's a fairly, with a little practice, that's sort of placing our consciousness into other places around us, or into the experience of another person, to experience empathy, to allow ourselves to feel the pain of someone else's body. So for me, consciousness, we are everywhere. We're fully embodied and everywhere.
I think that's probably the best place, a nice place to leave it, because I don't know where we can take this conversation because we can't prove any of this stuff. And it's just, at the same time, we can. We prove it with our own experience. Will Pye, thank you so much for exploring this with me.
Thank you, Paul.
It's been a wonderful conversation.
It's been a pleasure.
And that was Life, Passion and Business with Paul Harvey and my guest, posthumously, Will Pye. Now, of course, you cannot connect with Will anymore, but you can connect with his work, and there is lots of it about. You can find his website at willpye.com. Now, I don't know how long that website will be around, but at the moment it's still there. And you can find his books. He's written a book about gratitude, the gratitude prescription, blessed with a brain tumour, and he has his own blog where there are hundreds of entries into there. So do check out the website, do check out his work, because Will Pye was an amazing guy, and he had this real sense of magic in how life unfolded for him. Okay, as I mentioned at the beginning, now is a time to discover how to find some more focus in your life and get things done. Okay, so we're all looking to move forward. We all want to find some measure of success in the world. And if you've heard the podcast, you know I have a view of success, but that's another conversation. But the point is, however you look at this, we want to get things done. You might want to get a project over the line. You might have a really big goal that you're looking to move forward on. And the problem is, whenever we start these projects, whenever we do anything like this, there's always some resistance. There's always something that gets in the way. And that can be a multitude of things. But the key to this is, how do we retain focus and stay with the project and push it over the line? And that's where focus coaching can help. Now, it's a process that I discovered some 15 years ago during my coach training, and it's something sometimes called focus coaching, turbo coaching, speed coaching. And it's a really simple process where we define what it is you're trying to achieve, and we look at the resistance that you're experiencing in that achievement, come up with some strategies to solve that resistance, commit to setting a date, and I hold your feet to the fire to make sure that you do that. So there's a commitment, there's an accountability process, and that's it. That's basically how it works. You get it done. And I can tell you, it is so powerful when you start working in this way, particularly when you work with someone who supports you in the process of doing it. And one thing to remember, success is never guaranteed, but the struggle always is. And that's what this coaching is designed to do. It's designed to get you through the struggle towards the success you're looking for. So do check out the link on this podcast, or at the website lifepassionandbusiness.com. You will find a video of me again explaining this process. But if you go below the video, there's a booking link where we'll have a discussion about your project and how we could get you sorted. As always, if you have enjoyed this podcast, if you found anything here of any use, please share it with a friend, because that's how people like yourself find good podcasts. If you can, give us a review. Give us a 5-star review. I have to ask for 5 stars. Why not? I think I'm worth it. When you support a podcast in that way, you have no idea how effective it is, both in terms of supporting us on the platform, but it also makes us feel good. Yes, it makes me feel good, and I like to feel good. As always, thank you for your time and attention. I will catch you next time.